The collapse erased the old world's certainty, but it sharpened one truth with surgical precision. Fire is no longer warmth, comfort, or routine. Fire is exposure. In the quiet ruin of a dead civilization, smoke rises like a signal flare. Scent carries farther than reason, and even a faint glow can pull predators toward you with mathematical inevitability. Anyone who still cooks like the world is intact is already issuing their coordinates to every desperate faction scanning the horizon for weakness. Heat is no longer a domestic act. It is a tactical liability. In this new reality, survival is not measured by strength or preparation, but by how effectively you erase your own signature. The collapse has turned the air into an informant. It reports everything: the proteins vaporizing from a boiling pot, the microparticles drifting off damp wood, the rhythmic crack of breaking twigs. Long before a raider sees you, the environment has already told them you exist. That is the battlefield you inhabit now, one where detection is death and invisibility is the last remaining currency. Yet people fail because they approach cooking with old-world logic. They assume risk comes from the meal itself, when the true danger comes from the trail of signals left behind. To endure, you must adopt a new doctrine where heat is generated without exposure, where nourishment doesn't compromise position, and where cooking becomes an act of stealth rather than an act of comfort. The 7 tools that follow are not conveniences. They are instruments engineered to let you eat in a world that wants you erased. Master them, and you disappear. Fail, and you feed those who didn't. Smoke isn't a natural consequence of fire. It's a symptom of failure. Every wisp rising into the air is fuel that never completed its burn. Particles that should have turned to clean heat, but instead escaped as visible evidence of your presence. In a collapsed world, that failure is lethal. To understand why smokeless tools matter, you first have to understand what smoke actually is and why it betrays you so easily. Fire only burns clean when 3 conditions align. The fuel is dry enough to ignite instantly. The pieces are small enough for heat to penetrate fully, and the oxygen flow is strong enough to sustain complete combustion. Break any part of that triangle, and you create smoke. Wet wood forces the flame to waste energy evaporating moisture instead of burning the material itself. Thick branches heat unevenly, leaving their cores unburned and releasing dark particulates. Poor airflow smothers the flame, causing it to claw for oxygen and spit out half-burned vapor instead of heat. Every mistake becomes a plume that rises straight into someone's line of sight. And smoke doesn't just drift, it travels with intent. Moisture binds to it, wind stretches it, cold air preserves it. Even when the column isn't visible, the scent spreads farther than the eye can follow. In the silent wasteland left behind by the collapse, that scent becomes a trail animals, wanderers, and raiders can follow with primitive accuracy. You may think you're hidden behind walls or under canopy, but the smoke slipping out through cracks, vents, or broken windows will map your position with mathematical certainty. Once you understand that smoke equals unburned fuel, the logic becomes clear. The safest fire is the one in which nothing escapes. The less incomplete combustion you produce, the fewer signals you send, and the longer you survive. This is the foundation behind every tool that follows. Not comfort, not efficiency, but the elimination of the one element that turns cooking into a broadcast. If smoke is failure, then smokeless cooking is not a technique. It is discipline, The solar box furnace is the first tool in this doctrine because it generates heat without ever entering the combustion cycle that creates smoke in the first place. Nothing burns, nothing vaporizes, nothing releases a trace into the air. Instead of fighting the chemistry of fire, you bypass it entirely by capturing radiation and converting it into silent, contained heat. In a world where every particle rising from a flame can reveal your position, the furnace becomes a weaponized absence, heat with no signature. At its core, the solar furnace is a simple machine built on precise logic. Reflective panels concentrate sunlight toward an insulated chamber, raising internal temperatures far beyond what the raw environment provides. The result is a controlled oven that cooks slowly but invisibly. There is no scent because no combustion occurs, no smoke because nothing is burned, no thermal flare because the heat remains trapped inside the chamber instead of blooming outward into the air. To anyone observing from a ridge, a ruined roadway, or a drifting drone, the furnace looks like inert debris. Yet its power depends entirely on how you position it. The furnace does not forgive carelessness. A reflective panel angled incorrectly can flash, just once, and that single glint can travel farther than a smoke trail on a clear day. A silhouette placed on a ridgeline becomes a recognizable shape. Too much sky behind you and your posture gives you away. Operators who survive learn to deploy the furnace the same way they would deploy a sensor array, low to the ground, shielded, always in terrain that breaks line of sight while still allowing direct light exposure. The solar furnace demands patience, but that patience becomes a strategic advantage. While raiders huddle around smoky biomass fires that betray them long before they finish eating, you work within a different rhythm. You cook during daylight when the environment is loud with heat and thermal fluctuation, making detection far more difficult. You retrieve your meal hours later, long after the furnace has cooled to ambient temperature. There is no trace that anyone prepared food at all. Weather modifies the output but never negates it. Thin cloud layers dim the heat but still direct usable radiation. Dust-heavy air reduces efficiency but not function. Even in colder seasons, the concentrated capture of sunlight produces temperatures high enough to cook grains, roots, or preserved meat, so long as the operator respects the angles. In a world defined by scarcity and surveillance, the solar box furnace offers the one form of cooking that cannot betray you because it never speaks the language of fire. It has no smoke to reveal you, no scent to follow, no flame to reflect off broken glass and twisted metal. It is the purest form of stealth heat available. You're not hiding a fire. You're eliminating the concept of fire entirely. The rocket draft micro stove is the closest you can come to using fire without revealing that fire exists. Unlike the solar furnace, it doesn't bypass combustion. It perfects it. The stove's geometry forces air through a narrow burn tunnel, accelerating oxygen flow until the flame reaches temperatures high enough to consume fuel completely. And when fuel burns completely, it produces almost no smoke. What rises from the chimney is not a plume, but a faint shimmer of heat that dissipates before it can betray you. This is the physics behind stealth combustion. Eliminate incomplete burn, eliminate the signature. Most survivors who fail with makeshift fires fail for one of three reasons. The fuel is too wet, the pieces are too large, or the flame is starved of oxygen. The rocket stove solves all three through design. Because the burn chamber is vertical and insulated, it traps heat long enough to dry and ignite fuel instantly. Because the fuel must be fed in thin, uniform pieces, it forces operators to abandon thick branches and use only material that can combust thoroughly. And because the draw effect pulls air relentlessly from the intake to the chimney, the stove maintains a perfect flow that prevents the choking and smoldering that generate smoke. It is a system engineered to correct human error. Using it well requires discipline. You cannot cram fuel into the chamber. You feed it gradually, maintaining a balance between oxygen and burn rate. You cannot allow moisture-heavy biomass to linger in the tunnel. Even a single wet piece can create enough incomplete combustion to generate a visible trace. And you cannot position the stove carelessly. Even though it emits little to no smoke, it still produces a thermal bloom while active, a signature that must be shielded behind debris, walls, or terrain that breaks sightlines. Stealth fire is still fire. Respect is mandatory. The stove thrives in conditions where sunlight fails you. Overcast days, dense canopy, ruined urban corridors where reflective surfaces complicate solar capture. It also excels during mobility phases, when you must cook quickly and move before anyone can triangulate your position. Because it uses so little fuel and burns at such high efficiency, you leave behind almost nothing. A pinch of ash too small to track and no lingering scent of burnt wood. The environment stays clean of your presence. What makes the rocket stove indispensable is not its speed or heat output, but its reliability. When mastered, it behaves predictably. It responds to technique instead of chance. And in a world where uncertainty kills, predictability becomes a survival asset. You know exactly how much fuel you need. You know exactly how long the burn will last. You know exactly how much exposure you are risking. Every variable that used to betray you is controlled. The rocket draft microstove does not just burn fuel, it annihilates it. That annihilation is what keeps you alive. No smoke means no trail. No smolder means no scent. No lingering particles means no story for the wind to carry. The stove gives you what almost no fire can: heat that leaves nothing behind. The alcohol gel burner is the quietest flame you can deploy when the world is listening for mistakes. Unlike wood or biomass, gel fuel burns with remarkable completeness. No popping resin, no smoldering bark, no wet fibers struggling to ignite. Because the gel is already a refined, uniform substance, the flame doesn't need to fight its way through impurities. It burns evenly, tightly, and almost scentless. In a landscape where smoke is a confession and noise is an invitation, the alcohol burner becomes a controlled point of heat with one defining advantage. It produces almost nothing for the environment to report. What makes gel fuel especially valuable is the stability of its flame profile. It doesn't wander or flare unpredictably, and it doesn't spit out embers that can give away your position visually or thermally. The flame sits low, compact, and disciplined, something you can further hide behind even the simplest baffling. A metal cup, a cut can, a ring of stones, or a small dirt trench can swallow the little light it emits. Once contained, the burner becomes an invisible heat source even at night, when visibility is most unforgiving. Where wood fires paint bright signatures across walls, windows, and metallic surfaces, the alcohol flame barely reaches past its own container. But stealth does not mean simplicity. The alcohol burner punishes sloppy technique. Too much gel starves itself of oxygen and begins to bubble, creating incomplete combustion, the same failure that produces smoke in wood fires. Too little gel leads to flickering, unstable flames that rise unpredictably and risk being seen. Survivors who depend on this tool learn to work with precision, Load a thin layer, let it establish a steady flame, then add more only when the burn stabilizes. The goal isn't brightness or power. The goal is predictability. Its limitations shape how you use it. Gel fuel cannot be foraged, it must be scavenged from abandoned supply kits, medical caches, emergency depots, or forgotten first aid stations. That scarcity means the burner is not your everyday tool. It is your controlled risk solution for conditions where sunlight is gone, fuel is unreliable, and speed matters more than endurance. Think night movement, storms, dense fog, or situations where you must heat a meal quietly within the ruins of a structure. Still, when conditions align, no open flame system is cleaner. A properly shielded alcohol burner produces so little residue that it leaves no forensic trail behind. No char, no ash, no soot. There is nothing to smell, nothing to track, nothing to hint that anyone cooked there at all. In a world where exposure begins with imperfections in combustion, the alcohol gel burner survives by having almost none. It is fire reduced to its most disciplined form, heat without story, flame without evidence. The thermal retention oven is the first tool in this doctrine that teaches you to separate when you create heat from when you use it. Every other method requires an active burn, however controlled. This one does not. Instead, it captures heat during a brief intentional exposure window, minutes, not hours, and then cooks your food silently long after the flame has died. In a world where prolonged combustion is a death sentence, this time shift is not clever engineering. It is strategic survival. The principle is simple. Heat something dense, trap that heat, and let physics work for you. Stones, boiling water, brick fragments, or metal plates are brought to high temperature using any method available. Solar, gel, or even a fast, carefully shielded microburn from a rocket stove. Once the heat source reaches its peak, you seal it inside layers of insulation, fabric scraps, ash, dried grass, sand, or wool. Then you place your food in a secondary container inside that insulated chamber. The stored heat migrates slowly, cooking your meal without producing smoke, scent, flame, or thermal bloom. By the time the process is underway, you're already gone. This tool's strength lies in how aggressively it cuts your exposure time. A traditional fire might require an hour to simmer a pot. A rocket stove might reduce that to 20 minutes. A thermal oven can drop your vulnerable window to 2 or 3 minutes, just long enough to heat the stones or water before you bury all evidence and vanish. Raiders searching for hot spots will find none. Thermal optics will see only an object cooling at the same rate as the environment. Dogs will smell nothing but earth and dust. The cooking continues, but the world cannot detect it. Yet precision still matters. The initial heat charge must exceed the food's danger threshold, meaning it must get hot enough to keep bacterial growth from becoming a risk. Underheating is the only real failure point. If your stones aren't hot enough, the cook stalls early. If your insulation is weak, heat leaks quickly. The oven rewards those who prepare materials in advance. Pre-sorted insulation bundles, pre-cleaned cooking containers, stones staged near your burn source, so the exposure window remains short. This system excels whenever you need invisibility over speed. Long surveillance camps, nighttime evasion, injured movement, or deep forest hides all benefit from an oven that cooks while you're kilometers away. It also thrives in poor terrain where fuel is scarce or wet. You don't need perfect wood, you just need enough heat to charge the core once. The oven multiplies whatever thermal energy you can produce, but its greatest gift is psychological. It teaches you to stop thinking of cooking as an activity and start thinking of it as an operation. You are not heating food. You are minimizing exposure. You are not boiling a meal. You are refusing to be tracked. The thermal retention oven changes how you relate to risk by reminding you that survival belongs to those willing to prepare in silence and eat what was cooked in their absence. The biogas microburner is the only flame in the post-collapse world that begins clean before it ever burns. Methane doesn't need to fight moisture, resin, bark, or impurities. It arrives at ignition already refined, already uniform, already prepared to combust with near-total efficiency. And because incomplete combustion is what creates smoke, a fuel that burns almost perfectly produces almost no signal. That is why the biogas burner stands apart from every fire-based method. It generates heat without producing the chemical fingerprints that predators and raiders rely on to track survivors. Biogas is created from decay, food scraps, plant waste, even human waste sealed inside an airtight digester. As the material breaks down, methane accumulates as a pressurized gas. In the old world, this process belonged to wastewater treatment plants and agricultural systems. In the new world, it becomes a tactical advantage. You are turning what the environment discards into a controlled flame. That inversion of value is powerful. It frees you from relying on wood, biomass, or scavenged fuel, resources enemies expect you to pursue. While others are forced to travel farther and expose themselves gathering material, you become self-sustaining. When ignited, methane produces a clean blue flame so tight and efficient it can be baffled behind metal cups, broken tiles, or stone rings with almost no light bleed. At night, when even the faintest spark can get you killed, this matters. Its thermal signature is minimal, its scent negligible, its burn predictable. Where wood flames pulse and flare, the biogas burner holds a steady line. Where biomass fires spit particles into the air, biogas leaves nothing but heat. If you shield it correctly, it becomes the closest thing to invisible combustion the ruined world allows. But it demands respect. Pressure is both its strength and its danger. A damaged seal, a cracked fitting, or an overfilled digester can turn your energy source into an explosive threat. Even a minor leak can release enough odor to alert animals or humans with sharpened senses. The burner itself must be placed on stable ground. A tipped burner can create a sudden flash, small but bright enough in darkness to expose you. Survivors who rely on biogas learn to inspect seals constantly, vent pressure safely, and store digesters in shaded, stable locations. This tool thrives in long-term hideouts and semi-permanent shelters, places where consistency outweighs mobility. If you maintain the digester, the fuel renews itself daily. You gain something rare in the collapse: reliability. A fire source that does not depend on weather, terrain, or chance. A system that turns waste into survival. Used well, the biogas microburner gives you more than heat. It gives you freedom from predictable behavior, freedom from leaving trails, freedom from the desperation that pushes others into risky fires. In a world rebuilt around predation, self-generated clean fuel becomes its own form of invisibility. The electric spark heater breaks the oldest rule in human survival, that heat must come from fire. In the post-collapse world, abandoning that rule isn't innovation, it's self-preservation. Fire, no matter how controlled, always risks exposure. Electricity does not. When you convert stored energy directly into heat through resistance coils or improvised heating elements, you bypass combustion entirely. Nothing burns, nothing smolders, nothing escapes into the air to reveal you. In a landscape where every particle and scent can be weaponized against you, this shift is more than technological. It's tactical. The heater's greatest advantage is that it produces pure heat. No smoke, no scent, no flicker of flame that might reflect off metal or glass. It allows you to cook in places where fire would kill you. Abandoned basements, collapsed tunnels, vehicles sealed for warmth, underground shelters with no ventilation. In these enclosed spaces, even a small flame can suffocate you or alert enemies. The electric heater thrives there, warming food or water without altering the breathable air. When used at night, its invisibility is absolute. But electricity in the collapse is not free. You become a scavenger of charge the way others scavenge food. Dead cars hold dormant batteries that can still give minutes of heat. Hand-cranked dynamos found in old radios can power a small coil long enough to boil a cup. Pedal generators built from broken bicycles convert muscle into wattage. Even shattered solar panels can provide intermittent power when angled correctly. None of these sources are reliable alone, but together they form an ecosystem of energy that can keep you alive without exposing you to detection. The tool demands restraint. You do not run the heater continuously, you pulse it. Short bursts to raise temperature, pauses to conserve charge, another burst to maintain heat. This precision turns limited power into usable cooking windows. Overuse drains batteries faster than you can replenish them. Underuse leaves food partially cooked and unsafe. Balance determines survival. Though electric heat emits no visible signature, poorly shielded wiring can create electromagnetic noise detectable by rare scavenged sensors. Most raiders lack such equipment, but the few who possess it are the ones who hunt methodically. Shield your cables under fabric, foil, or debris. Operate deep within structures or terrain that naturally dampens signal. Treat electricity the same way you treat flame, with discipline, not complacency. The heater's value becomes clearest when mobility is essential. You can cook while hidden, while pressed against a wall, even while waiting in complete silence for danger to pass. There is no setup time, no smoke trail, no cleanup. The only footprint is the food you eat. Electric heat is not the future. It is the loophole in the past. It allows you to warm, purify, and survive without ever announcing yourself to the world outside. Fire exposes you. Electricity lets you vanish. The stone core heat battery is the most primitive tool in this doctrine, yet it offers one of the most advanced survival advantages. It lets you cook with heat that no longer exists at the source. You create warmth once, then sever every trace of the moment it was made. By the time the food begins to cook, the danger has passed, the fire is dead, and you are already gone. In a world where the act of heating is more dangerous than the act of eating, that separation becomes a form of tactical invisibility. The principle is brutally straightforward. Stone, brick, ceramic, or dense metal absorbs heat slowly, but releases it even more slowly. Once you elevate its temperature, through a solar furnace, a short concealed rocket burn, or even a brief alcohol flame, you bury that heat inside layers of insulation, sand, ash, dry earth, shredded fabric, grass, wool, anything that traps thermal energy can serve. Then you place your food against or within the mass and seal the chamber. The stones radiate silent, steady warmth for hours. The meal cooks. Nothing escapes. There is no scent trail, no smoke, no glow, no signature. The environment has nothing to report. Its value becomes obvious when you consider the math of exposure. Every minute a fire burns is a minute you can be triangulated. Every second you maintain flame multiplies the risk of detection. But with a stone core system, your exposure happens in a controlled flash. Heat the stones fast, shut everything down, bury the evidence, and walk away. While raiders scan ridgelines for smoke or chase the fading trail of a biomass fire, your food is cooking kilometers from where you stand. They search the wrong place at the wrong time, but precision still rules. The stones must be heated past a safe threshold, or the cook will stall and the food becomes dangerous. The insulation must be dense enough to prevent rapid heat loss. The chamber must remain sealed. Even small gaps weaken the slow cook effect. This tool does not reward improvisation, it rewards preparation. Survivors who rely on it often pre-stage insulated pits or containers along their travel routes, turning forgotten corners of the wasteland into silent, invisible kitchens. Its only limitation is weight. Stones are not mobile, so the system is best suited for hideouts, semi-permanent shelters, or cached positions you revisit. Yet that limitation becomes strength when used correctly. A stone core battery can lie dormant indefinitely. Anyone passing by sees only dirt, rubble, or debris, not a functioning part of your survival network. More than any other tool, the stone core heat battery teaches the philosophy needed to endure the collapse. Survival belongs to those who plan ahead, who prepare before hunger arrives, and who refuse to expose themselves in the moment they are most vulnerable. It is the perfect expression of stealth cooking. Heat created in danger, food completed in silence. Every tool in this doctrine leads to the same conclusion. Survival in the collapse is no longer about producing heat. It is about controlling the cost of heat. The world hunts signatures now. Raiders follow scent. Drones track thermal flares. Animals detect incomplete combustion with a precision far older than civilization itself. The difference between those who endure and those who vanish is not strength, speed, or even skill. It is the discipline to generate warmth without leaving a trail, to nourish yourself without announcing that you exist. That discipline is the spine of smokeless survival. The 7 tools are not conveniences. They are adaptations. The solar furnace teaches you to harvest heat without emitting anything. The rocket stove teaches you to burn fuel so completely that nothing escapes. The alcohol burner gives you a flame with no story. The thermal retention oven separates exposure from payoff. The biogas burner frees you from predictable patterns. The electric heater breaks your dependence on combustion entirely. And the stone core battery proves that heat can serve you long after the fire that created it has disappeared. Together, they form a single doctrine. Fire is no longer your ally unless it is invisible. In a ruined world where the air betrays you, the soil remembers you, and the night amplifies every mistake, invisibility becomes the last real power a survivor can claim. Smokeless cooking is not about technique. It is about refusing to be found. It is the quiet assertion that you will eat, you will endure, and you will not die because you signaled your presence to someone who needed your meal more than you did. Smoke is a confession. Silence is a strategy. Heat without signature is sovereignty.